So I'd like to call the meeting of the 141 Portanimicut Task Force to order. We are being taped tonight, not for live broadcast, but it will be available on VOD. And just know that at the end of the meeting that the tape will be continuing to run after we adjourn. So take appropriate conversations or inappropriate conversations outside. The first order of business tonight is to review traffic and circulation concerns at 141 Portanimicut Road and the Town Landing. And that involves a meeting with the Orleans Chief of Police, welcome, and the Natural Resources Manager. So do you want to come up to so you have a mic? I'm also going to ask that public comment tonight because we're being taped, that you come up to this mic and identify yourself, if you would, just so we have.
Well, Jenny, thanks for the chief and Nate commenting us so quickly. I've given them a little bit of background about that you're a task force of the Conservation Commission and that you're working on studying the not so recent acquisition of 141 Portanimicut Road and ultimately making some recommendations for its future land use to CONSCOM.
Yeah.
So they have that background, and thanks for coming, guys.
Okay, so if I could start, if you don't mind, with the police issues, and I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of the backstory on parking issues at the landing.
Certainly, as you may be aware, the town struggles with parking issues at all, if not the majority, of our town landing. So we have these beautiful natural resources that people want to go to and utilize. We also have residents that live in this area, and sometimes it's difficult to find the appropriate balance of the use of the area. Some of our more significant issues is during commercial bass season, where the police department has spent thousands of dollars trying to properly regulate the parking at some of our town landings. More recently, we've had some issues at the Portanimicut landing, where I have gone down after receiving complaints from citizens that there is public safety issues with individuals parking vehicles, sometimes it's vehicles and boat trailers, in positions that are causing sightline issues. And when you typically have sightline issues, those may result in motor vehicle accidents. One individual brought in photographs of an accident that had taken place in the past. So that puts me in a position where I've been put on notice. I really have to look at these issues and determine whether or not it is a public safety issues. When I look at this specific area, it's tight. There's not a lot of room to park on the side of the road. And technically speaking, when you have a vehicle that's parked on the side of the road, and let's say you have the tires on the paved portion of the road in the travel lane, it's a violation. Mm-hmm. Clearly, we don't go out and give parking tickets to everyone that has a couple of tires parked on the side of the road. We'd be writing tickets all day long. So we try to be very reasonable in parking enforcement when it comes to that. Again, in this specific area, it becomes a little bit more problematic when we have some of those sightline issues. So Nate and I have really been working hard to try to resolve this issue. Again, finding the balance where visitors can come and utilize this area, at the same time respecting the folks that live in that particular area. The issue of the property, and you were in that property for a while, right? You were housed in there for a while. We appreciate the consideration and this discussion of the possibility of maybe having some parking available to visitors in that area. I don't know what that would look like. I guess we just, at this point, want to put it on your radar and see if this is something that you would even entertain. And maybe if that's something you're willing to do, then we can kind of drill down and get into a little bit more detail on how that would look. So that, from my perspective, from a public safety perspective, that's where I am with this. Anything that we can do to increase parking in an area that is desirable would be beneficial.
So right now you have no parking signs on the outward side. So
If you're leaving, yes.
if you're leaving,
Yeah,
there's
there
no
are some
parking
signs
there.
already erected. And we tried to be creative. We worked with our DPW and tried to get the growth back, the vegetation pushed back, so, maybe we could have some parking on the side of the road. It didn't really solve the...
It's not a laid out road, is it?
I don't believe it is a layout road. Do you know? I don't believe it is. I don't believe it is. What makes it even more problematic.
So you've got a lot of traffic in the summer, and you've got a lot of boat trailers parked there in the summer. So how many people can the landing accommodate now? At, say, well, I wouldn't park there at mid-tide because it's not going to be mid-tide for long. But, I mean, is there parking at the landing at all?
Well, let me defer to my expert over here when it comes to...
Sure. When you refer to the landing, I envision the turnaround area next to the bulkhead. There is sufficient parking there, I would say, to accommodate recreational use, single vehicles, non-truck and trailer. One of the challenges with the truck and trailer parking is that if you were to park a truck and trailer down at the landing, it would impede the ability for trucks and trailers to launch boats there, to make the turn, come down into the landing, line up for the ramp, back down. You are able to nestle in single vehicles with no trailers. I would say that you probably have 6 to 8 spots there for single vehicles. The true challenge is we have a boat ramp here, and we have limited amount of boat ramps for access to Pleasant Bay. It's not a deep water boat ramp. River Road is our deep water boat ramp for Pleasant Bay. That is incredibly overburdened during the summer months, especially during commercial bass season. We have put parking restrictions in place for resident only at that landing, June 15th to September 15th, to try to resolve that problem. It has worked out to date, but now that there's been light shed on the fact that the way the trucks and trailers have historically been parking down at the end of Portanimicut Road along the side of the road, and that they're in violation, it's going to cause all sorts of new issues in terms of availability for anybody that would like to launch a boat at that ramp.
Is there any thought at this point of making that landing residents only?
So Nate and I have been tasked by the Board of Selectmen with really evaluating all of our town landings, and we have prioritized several areas. The areas that really see get the most activity, and we're going to be finalizing our report to the board April 1st, which is a public hearing as I understand it. So we will be providing that information at that point. Respectfully, I'd rather not get into details because we might want to refine some things at this point. But to answer your question, yes, we are prioritizing, and whether or not that's one of the specific areas that's going to be addressed, we'll have to wait until see what the board wants to do with that.
And to be honest, in initial discussions, looking at the highest priority locations, the most overburdened locations, the deep water ramps in town, those have been addressed. But what happens is once you address locations, then there's consequences from that, and the out-of-town folks will find the next best solution, which might not be a deep water ramp. And we've seen the effects of that from River Road, resident-only restrictions, with additional non-resident truck and trailers parking in Portanimicut.
There's nowhere else to park in that area that's walkable, or, I mean, you couldn't traffic at River Road, they can come out and park here, but there isn't that kind of availability.
It's a little different too because River Road is a shorter road and there's
Right.
the ability to turn your vehicle around at the end of it and come back and get your boat. Portanimicut's a little different. Even if we could figure out a way to send the truck and trailer further up the road, so picture yourself coming from the landing and heading back up towards Route 28. If we were able to find locations to pull off to the side of the road where they're able to get off the asphalt, the most practical way to retrieve your boat would to be back down the road towards the landing to grab your boat. So the further you go up the road, the further you get it back down, and I can see there being issues, and we might be making that even more of a dangerous situation.
There's no easy solution to this problem, and hence our presence here with you this afternoon. I mean, anything that we can do to try to alleviate the parking on the roadway would certainly be helpful.
So, some of the questions that came up, and I'll open it up if anybody wants to, is one of the questions that came up in a hearing the other day was how many mooring holders are there? Some number I heard was 40.
That sounds realistic. Combination of recreational, commercial. The commercial moorings would vary depending on the amount of shellfishing that's going on in Pleasant Bay. So when there's significant amount of quahogs or soft shell clams off of that area in Little Pleasant Bay or in Big Pleasant Bay, I would be issuing more commercial permits for moorings. There hasn't been as many in the past just because the fishery has been more lucrative in Town Cove and Nauset waters, but I can see that coming back. Yeah. So it's somewhere between 30 and 40, but I can give you an exact number.
At some point, that might be helpful. Are there any other questions from the task force about parking before we step off into other issues?
No, not questions. I like the idea of, like you said, the highway department are clear, to see them get off the road. But you're right about the trailers, and think about that. The further you go up, backing down, that's scary. So I don't know. And if you did trucks and trailers in the town landing, you're right, they won't be able to turn around. So I don't know.
Right.
Is there a policy regarding the distance off the pavement one has to park?
You cannot obstruct the travel lane whatsoever, and then we get into the laid-out road issue. If it's a non-laid-out road, then that is a private property issue. The town has no right to whatever that, I don't know, it's 2 or 4 feet, whatever it is, off the roadway. So, again, non-laid-out road, it's really irrelevant, to be honest with you. And, in that specific area where people tend to park, there's no room. I've gone down there and seen a vehicle in the middle of the travel lane facing in the wrong direction. I mean, that's very common. So when I go down there and see that, we, in our response, in the police department's response, now it turns into, okay, we need to bring some enforcement element into this, and we want to start by educating. And that is with warning. So we started a campaign where we started to warn people. We don't like to give people fines unless we absolutely have to. So that's the process we're in now. There's less of those warnings been given out recently, so maybe it's working. But I think if it is, it's temporary. Summer months are coming. And as Nate had mentioned, when things change with the fisheries and shellfishing, all of a sudden they become a more active area. So we're kind of just kicking the can down the road, thinking that it's not going to be an ongoing problem.
Bill?
I had a question which I think you partly answered, Chief McDonald, because I wasn't clear what a laid-out road was. But let me make sure I understand this. So if people parked off the pavement, there's when there's private property adjacent to the road, there's a very short distance of 2 to 4 feet, something like that.
Yeah, and John, are you aware of the exact?
Yeah, so I think it pretty much only extends to edge of pavement fill. And then if the non-laid out road and that edge of pavement is up adjacent to private property, Once you're off that pavement, you're probably off the town's property.
Okay, what about town's property?
Well, that was a question I was gonna ask if no one asked it, because just to highlight, your charge, talking about, with these two folks, circulation, access improvements, coordination with adjacent municipal landing, creation of new amenities, including parking, including access control and sticker, which we do have to debate at some point. So we should stay in touch with you on those policy discussions, I think, that you have. But the question I was gonna ask, and this group will look at probably everything from shoulder-type parking circulation improvements to full site. Who knows? That's the bookends. But in a shoulder parking improvement situation, if you get all four tires out of the traveled way, is that a parker that's in violation?
It wouldn't be a violation of a parking regulation per se. Whether or not that's an intrusion on the right-of-way, the private property, that's another matter that is not within my expertise.
But if it were on 141,
Yeah,
On their property.
if it were on
You're not-
our
It's
property,
150 feet
do
of
whatever you
frontage
want. It's your property. You can, my concern would be if we encouraged or allowed parking on private property
right?
on someone else's. Obviously, that would be, I have no authority to give that, but as the property owner, certainly, if you wanted to allow that, that would not be
So-
an issue.
Well,
Town property.
Yeah.
Sure,
Town.
where the 141 has about 146 feet of frontage, where if an accommodation could be made to get all four wheels off, it sounds like that might be a safer situation. It's probably not ideal, but that, when you start to consider whatever access or circulation or parking improvements you want to recommend, that seems to be one end of the spectrum.
And we want to look at not just having the four tires off the pavement, we also want to look at sightline issues, if there's some access, if someone wants to exit in a particular area, even if the vehicle's four tires are off the pavement.
So we would come to you and
Yes,
your
I would
department
recommend
and
the traffic study committee, which I chair, we would bring that to the committee and let us evaluate that and provide you with a recommendation on how you could move forward with that.
Okay, that's very helpful. I'm going to get to public comment, but I'd like to wait until we finish talking to Nate and Chief McDonald, because we're going to do this in a slightly different way today than we have, just because of the taping. So we had some questions that came up from Nate, and if it's okay with you, I'll start. One of the questions for you, Nate, has been in a global sense. Is there any interest in your department using the building as it stands now? You can't use it as an office, don't want to use it as an office, but is there any interest in using any part of it for accessory use, seasonal accessory use? Some of these questions are coming from the public, some of these questions are coming from us.
There's interest in my department in the future of propagation for shellfish.
Okay.
Not specifically at Portanimicut, but an area or landing at town that would be most conducive to that. And we really haven't put into the legwork into finding out exactly where that location is yet. So
And
There has been
you're
some-
talking about Upweller?
Upwellers, yeah. And to be honest, I know that it's been thrown around that the building could be suitable for upwellers. I think we'd have to do a little more legwork on that to figure out whether that was good long-term planning. I want to reiterate that I would like you to include aquaculture and upwellers in long-term options, meaning like whether we use the house to do it or not, it would be nice down the road for it to be in some type of plan that it could be used for that if the town decided to go in that direction. But for me to tell you whether or not, you know, a single-family home with a couple garage bays is the best structure for upwellers, I can't answer.
But you wouldn't actually need a structure either, is that correct, for an upweller, that you could do it with, what did you call them, floatsies or? Floatsies.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different ways to do it. And no, I wouldn't need a structure necessarily.
Do you need power for flupsies though, Phil? Or you do solar?
They can be operated solar. I mean, you get into the area where there's a lot of variables, and I agree with Nate. Usually when anybody's siting an upweller, there's all kinds of, assessments that you do.
So,
And I once
sorry.
worked at an outdoor upweller that had covers. And it was a good thing because one August I was working there and we had a freak hailstorm. And I was grading baby oysters and the hail was like peas and I had to cover it up and go hide in the truck for half an hour. But there's other considerations.
so I'm just picking these questions
Mhm.
randomly,
I can
so as not
give
to.
a little more to answer on the first
Oh,
one
okay.
as well, because I know that there's been some thought that a satellite office for the harbor master.
Mhm.
In a perfect world, you know, sure, would be great, but I don't spend very much time in my office. I'm out on the road in the field most of the time, and so is my staff. Because we've gone in the direction with the new facility, we're all in. We're setting up and building the foundation of my administrative support there. We're issuing permits. I'm not so sure that I could competently say that I could justify holding onto the building for a satellite office with the staff and the organization that I have now.
Fair. What about using the possibility of keeping a rescue boat on site?
Well, I'm not sure that would be an option unless there was some type of pier structure there. Tying up the bulkhead, which is very limited boats, area for launching boats anyways. To have a boat there and take up prime real estate for others to be able to launch their boat, I don't think it's the best use based on the limited area that's available. I certainly would be up for the discussion about the possibility of a pier. It's centrally located on Pleasant Bay. Right now we have to come out of Meeting House Pond and go all the way out the river for rescues. So having a boat in that location would probably save me some response time because I'd be going over a road rather than coming out with a boat and traveling through all the no-wake zones when I need to respond. But long-term stuff, but I'm not sure that would something that would happen overnight, but I think that you should always keep some of these options in the plan for long-term possibly.
So it's been pointed out that that is not an area of prohibition for piers.
We had done a little homework when we were at one point hoping that it might turn into a long-term office for us, and it sounded like that. It would be a questionable depth there. We'd have to do some work to see if we had enough water, and how far the pier would actually have to go out to float the boat at all times.
We have some
We did
limited
do-
bathymetry,
Yeah,
yes.
we did do a little bit, Nate, and perhaps we can get you that.
Is there eelgrass in there? It's flooded every time I go out there. It's like,
There's definitely spotted eelgrass in there, and there's significant beds, but from when I walked to the area where we envisioned the pier, there didn't seem to be eelgrass in that location.
what else is there? So this is a question based on conversations that we've had through Conservation Commission, and you may have answered it in part because you and the chief are evaluating the landings for parking. Is there any plan at the moment to include Portanimicut in the long-term improvement plannings of the landings?
Not to date.
Okay.
It's a little more, and only because we didn't want to. Clearly, it's not necessarily under our jurisdiction anyway. So I mean, you have the property under the jurisdiction of the Conscom, and then we have the town landing. I think it should be, but we haven't had any of that conversation yet.
Okay. I think I have covered the questions that I took notes on from our last couple of meetings. Is there anything from the task force? John?
Well, I'm just thinking, I can't remember what the chief said, but he said something that I kind of sensed the need to maybe track his work and then see if you want to circle back with him on final recommendations. And it was kind of around circulation and access improvements. So, and also
That's
the
the
issue which
April
is in our
8th.
charge, the access control or parking restrictions, that's sticker and resident only.
Mhm.
So if there's ultimately accommodations recommended on 141, you guys will have to take a position on whether it should be sticker or access control.
Can we do that?
Where are we with parking enforcement? I don't know as if
In terms of that town, now the landing is town property, right? So,
the landing is.
Yeah.
But
Landing is.
if there were to be a parking area on the conservation property and the recommendation was to make that available for residents only, are we able to enforce that?
let me answer your question with a question. I mean, you being a town entity, I think it may be possible, but I would want to get a legal opinion from Mike Ford on that. Are there any other, so when we're looking at things that we have enforced in the past at our lakes, that's clearly probably town property.
Pilgrim was the only one we did, and we really took the sign down because it's never full.
Was that a transfer of ownership? Because we had enforced resident sticker parking only down there for years.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Well,
that's a
maybe
that
that's
is a
given us an
conflict, yeah.
indication that that is probably lawful authority on our part to do so. Again, we would follow up with Mike on that, but it's a possibility.
So I guess we would want to track any developments on some of the, you guys said you're going to do like a landing study or a parking study at the landings in the near future. Is that in the next 6 months or 3 months?
No, we're pretty much done with that out of respect to the Board of Selectmen. We didn't want to speak to it here in this forum until we had an opportunity to
Sure.
speak with the board. But we're pretty much wrapped up with our priority recommendations. There are many issues. There's pretty much issues at every single town landing.
Mhm.
But we try to prioritize so we can really start the process moving. So that is coming up on April 1st, I believe you mentioned.
It is.
Nate.
It's 2 weeks from.
The comprehensive town-wide approach, Chief and I are concerned that there was certain areas that we weren't comfortable waiting it out, and we needed to address them, immediately prior to this coming season, and that's what we'll be bringing forward on April 1st. But I see a town-wide comprehensive look at all landings and parking issues in town in the future.
So that's 3 weeks out. That's not very far out at all.
No, and I can track that as they present their material to the Board of Selectmen and bring it back to you, so you're aware of what recommendations were made and what actions were taken, if any.
May I?
Absolutely.
It's my understanding that the presentation of is priority landings on April 1st. And so my question would be, how much longer do you think the rest of the comprehensive study would take?
I really,
Because you've already said Portanimicut's not one of those immediate priorities, so we wouldn't be having information about this particular landing.
I would speculate that we're going to get further direction from the Board of Selectmen at this hearing. At least I would hope we get further direction on where they would like Nate and I to take this. Again, this was just something that Nate and I wanted to get the ball rolling here. We had to do something. We could just stay in limbo forever, but this would give us an opportunity to identify those priority problem areas and take some sort of action. But really, the issue here is, does the board and the community as a whole really want to go down the path of resident-only parking areas, and that's something that's being debated as we speak, and that's beyond 8-9.
Right.
We can provide recommendations, but that's really a community decision.
And one of the issues that I think is immediately apparent with the Portanimicut parking issue is that where would you put the signs even? Because once people start down the road and there's no place to park, then they still have to turn around and get out. And so it's incredibly complicated. Russ, do you have anything? John, you have not.
I'll just keep throwing stuff out there.
Okay.
I know you want to ask, but you're forgetting.
No, I've
But
got one
I'll
here
name here.
that's
We
still
did-
left. I've got one
We
that's
did an
left.
onsite, and the task force walked down and saw the small area at Coastal Beach where some of your mooring holders come and go and stuff like that. Couple
It's
of
on my
dinghies-
list, John.
Okay, good. A couple of dinghies were there. And we're charged with probably recommending some amenities ultimately going forward. Any interest in somehow organizing the dinghy storage, relocating it, providing more? How much do you need to provide? How many mooring holders are coming and going typically? I know we got 40 and a lot of commercial, but we've had some anecdotal evidence on kind of the numbers of dinghies there during the summer season, but any feelings on that you want to share with this group?
To be honest, the arrangement of the dinghies and the way they've been stored hasn't necessarily been on my radar in terms of it being an issue. Certainly would be happy to accommodate any requests from the task force in terms of if that was an issue and about how they were being stored. As far as issuing more moorings or allowing more dinghies to be stored, our mooring fields are parking dependent, meaning
Right.
you know, that's where we're limited. So it's been my philosophy that it doesn't make much sense for me to issue you a mooring if there's nowhere for you to park ever. Right. So that landing sees significant traffic. It's one of our premier commercial access points for shellfishermen, but most recently aquaculturemen and women. We have nine grants out there, and those grants can be up to 2 acres. Some of them only a half acre, but they can expand up to 2 acres. And the ones that have expanded up to 2 acres have up to 6 employees working for them, 2-3 boats in order to run their farm, and each one of those workers comes in a vehicle sometimes. So a single grant will see 2 truck and trailers and multiple employee vehicles. A single grant, and there's 9 of them out there. So they're not limited. That's what it takes to run a 2-acre farm too. And I don't have everybody working at the full potential of what they could be working, but that could happen. And there's only so many places to access with boats in Pleasant Bay, and our deep water ramp on River Road needs to be prioritized for all, commercial and all other uses. And we're already seeing overburden there. So if we take away the historic use of Portanimicut for the commercial end of it, I can't imagine how we're going to find access for the grants that are out there now. And it's important to the economy that's going on here.
Would it be fair to say that adding, I mean, it's not going to be a ton of parking, I would anticipate, because we still need to provide for passive recreation and the best conservation values around. But would it be fair to say that adding some parking at 141 would not eliminate the problem?
I think that's fair to say. And there's the whole theory, you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
We build it and add more space, and maybe more people would want to utilize that. And it's a never-ending battle
Right, and it's not going to get any easier because the landings are eroding away. We've seen that down at Mill Pond. We've seen that at Sparrowhawk.
And we have a parking area down at this landing in particular that,
It's underwater.
each coming, we see it underwater more and more.
Yeah, I drove over there one day and went, no, I don't think I'll be parking there. But thank you, John, for bringing up the kayak racks. I was trying not to.
I had multiple times when I had the office there, I had to loan people boots so we could get back to the vehicle for the hour that we were in an interview.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
I mean, it doesn't
Ouch.
happen all the time.
Yeah.
Warn them?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Russ, I'm sorry, I'd go back to you. Anything at this time? Okay.
I have a question, kind of off a little bit, but what about the landing at the end of Quonset?
Sure.
Do anything with that? It just seems like, I don't know if anybody even uses it. And there's a building there too, is that ours? Is that the town's?
It's not ours,
It's
no.
the town's,
It's
okay.
private. Unfortunately not ours, because that would be a prime location for aquaculture. I believe it belongs to the
Why would they look into
Winslows.
Maybe they want to give it to us.
You could ask.
We could ask. I mean, it was an aquaculture facility permitted at one point.
What's that? Phil, anything else?
Okay, that boat ramp is even more challenging than one at Portanimicut.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing because that's why nobody uses it.
Yeah.
But can we do anything to make it better so that more people will go down there, kind of spread it out?
We are doing it, and Ginny's aware of this, it's included in the Pleasant Bay dredging permitting that we're seeking, so that we were able to dredge and get rid of that bar that's closing off that boat ramp. That would lead to that ramp being more desirable for sure.
Yeah. I am aware. Phil?
Yes, one more question. I think last time we wanted to ask Nate a question about dinghies, which was asked, but people also wanted to ask about storage of kayaks, canoes, that sort of thing. Your opinion on that?
I take a lot of heat for this one. So, right now we don't allow the storage of any vessels at our town landings, besides if they're specifically issued to a mooring. At one point, there were permits allowed for kayaks at town landings, and it got to the point where they were no longer able to issue those because they were completely overburdening the landings. If you build kayak, my opinion is if you build kayak, all we do is chase around kayaks all summer long. Kayaks and vessels that are left behind, canoes left behind at landings. The grandkids come into town for the weekend, they haul everything out of the boathouse, they use it once, and literally no one comes back for this stuff, ever. I have 40 plus kayaks locked up right now. Canoes, as far as the eye can see.
Chatham said they had
Derelicts.
something like 2 acres worth of
We can-
kayaks in a field.
Right. There will be an auction at some point.
We discussed this last meeting, and you remove them for us, and thank you for that.
Absolutely.
But at some point, they're police auctioned, I think is what's been done in the past, but, or whatever you do with them, but, you know, we just removed a lot with your department from, Fisherman's Landing off of Crystal.
We're constantly removing them all season long. And the issue is, the reason we remove them, for one reason, is that if they end up out in the water, we have to assume there's a person in the water. And we will launch myself, our department, the police, the fire department, the Coast Guard, and spend all day and lots of money looking for these people. And lots of times they're not clearly identified even when we recover the vessel, so there's no phone number to call, no contact information. If we did a kayak racks, there are people that legitimately deserve probably to be able to store their kayaks at town landings because they're avid water people. They're going out on the kayaks daily, weekly. I'm not sure how I'd be able to single those people out and say, you deserve it because you're going to play by the rules and you're going to use it enough that to justify storing it at our landing. we'd have to do some type of lottery. And I can tell you one of the most common questions that we get at our office is, can we leave our kayak or our canoe down at the landing for the weekend? We would like to store our kayak canoes at the landings. My concern is if we do a lottery, the people that really deserve it aren't going to be the ones that get it. And what we're going to do is just make it easier. Instead of storing your canoe out in your backyard and having to look at it next to your shed, you'll find a place to store it down the beach because you got your name pulled in the lottery. And then essentially all we're doing is storing boats for people at these locations.
There's been a lot of discussion. In Brewster, at Paynes Creek, they have kayak racks, and I don't know how that's handled, but they're assigned in some way. And that's in Brewster. That's a very stressed. It's not even a landing anymore. But I think that there's a lot of discussion in town about how we might be able to do that down the road, just simply because it eliminates some traffic, especially in the neighborhoods where people could then walk or bike to get to a town landing instead of having to take a vehicle.
So if you have property under your control, it might be something worthy of talking about having a club that you can join, and the club can have a kayak rack that can be issued to them. You need to be a member of this club, follow all their rules, and
Would you be in charge of this club?
no.
Fair question, though. Good answer. I like it.
Make sure you're safe.
Property
I will return your property to you when I find it, and it's clearly, marked with their identification on it, but.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions from the task force or John? I'd like to open it up to questions from the public, and I know these are busy people. Chief McDonald's been dealing with health and safety issues all day, so he's probably hungry and tired, and so is Nate. But I would ask if you would to come up and identify yourself if you're going to ask a question, just so we have it on tape. Any questions from the public?
It's not a question, but just a general statement and so forth. I'm a neighbor and I want to.
Oh, thank you, Nate. That would be good. Yeah, you can stay there. We'll do it this way. Oops.
It's not a question, it's just that I'm a neighbor, and I just want to let you know what is happening to my property, which is a neighbor to this property, just so you'll be aware of what is going to be happening. This is 141. I own the immediate adjoining property here at 19. When I say adjoining, it is adjoining at low tide, but not at high tide. The boundary is about at the half tide. But I'm 84. I'm going to try and live as long as I possibly can, but when I do pass away, which I hope will be a long time in the future, I'm planning to leave my property to the Orleans, the Conservation Trust. I own 119 here. There's a little bit here, 119. This is also 119. It's 116 directly across the road here. 110, which is the woods behind it, with a vernal pool here. Number 128, 6 Thelma's Way. I also have the deeds for the end of Lockwood Lane and for Thelma's Way. I own about 20 acres, all told, and all of it was going to the Conservation Trust. I also own the head of the marsh here. This is 16 Deacon's Way. and I have a life tenancy, my life estate for 2 parcels at 109. When my brother died, he left those to me, but he also put into his will what happens to them when I die. In order to avoid a probate, the lawyers for the estate put it into the person who would inherit it when I die, with me having a life estate for these 2 parcels at 109. We are in conjunction with the Conservation Trust. We are starting to try to raise some money in order to buy them out, so those parcels will also go to the Conservation Trust. I have put into my will that the property is to be used for conservation, passive recreation, and wildlife refuge. Really just want to let you know what is going to be happening to the neighborhood and how it might affect the 41. There may be a question which has probably arisen by some people about possibly using my property for parking. I'm going to have to say very bluntly, the land has been in my family for a very long amount of time. My father was born in Australia, but my mother was an old Cape Codder. The marsh, which is down in here to the south of it, was purchased by my great, that is 7th great-grandfather from the Indians in 1658. Part of it has been in the family ever since. And my family, I believe, has owned the upland behind it for probably sometime in the early 1700s. South Orleans, back in the 1600s and 1700s, and East Harwich was essentially an Indian reservation. But my ancestor apparently had bought the marsh for the hay for his cattle, salt hay. He lived down in the Valley Neck area. Anyway, to make a long story short, my roots in the property are very deep. I love the property very much, which is why I'm leaving to the Conservation Trust. I want to see it protected, and I think the best way is with the Conservation Trust. I'm going to have to say very bluntly, I love it. I want it to go to conservation. I do not want it to go to become a parking lot. I know you may have feelings in that direction, but I want to see it go to conservation for conservation. I don't want to see it become a parking lot.
Thank you. Thank you for your generosity.
If there's any questions, or if there's anyone have anything, and if any of you would like to see the property, I would be very glad to take you for a walking tour of the property.
That's very generous. Thank you very much. Since you're here, Aisha, and do you have a vision, wish, desire for or thoughts on how to best manage 141?
It is simply a general feeling. Since I believe in conservation, I would I'd probably say take the building down, and I know it'd be very good for parking, if not for with boat trailers, at least for individual people, and let the people enjoy it. In addition to the building there and the landing, there's also a little bit of a beach along the water. It could be used by the neighborhood as a beach. My quote-unquote beach, sometimes very small, sometimes a decently large. That varies from year to year, or 10-year period to a 10-year period. And I might just add as a footnote, I do have a permit for 99 years for the walkway, which goes out across the marsh. There's a sign at the beginning of the walkway which says, "Private property, pass at your own risk." It does not say no trespassing. I allow the neighbors to come down and to wander around my property and use it, although I haven't seen it very much in recent years. It used to be that the neighborhood children would come in and play in my large field, and they were very welcome. And I suspect that when I die, I might just add, behind my property here is the town Cedar Swamp Conservation Area, the so-called Christian property. There's 190 or 200 feet common boundary. The Conservation Trust has just bought 3 pieces up here. Together with my 20 acres, it would make about 45 acres total, and they'd probably have a walkway or trails from the backway of the property they've acquired. There's a hiking trail around the Cedar Swamp and around here. They'll probably connect onto my property and come down. I have frontage on Paul Wall Pond. I have cut a lawn through here, and I'm thinking of extending the lawn right down through to the edge of the top of the bank. And they'll probably come down on this property and come down to the water.
That'd be amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
If there are any questions, if there's anything whatsoever that I can add, I'll be very glad to.
Thank you for coming out. Is there anything?
But I will ask that I hope that all of you as citizens will try, after I'm no longer here, try and see that it is preserved for everyone. And it will not last forever, although it says forever. Another 2,000 years, we'll have the ocean right here. Another 50,000 years, you'll come to the canal, look across, all you see is water out here. But as I tell people, in the meantime, use it and enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Would you just identify yourself?
I'm Bob Clary, and I'm not better to Risha. And when it,
just for the record, my first name is Risha, R-A-C-H-I-A. My last name is Heilman, H-E-Y-E-L-M-A-N.
Thank you very much.
I've been in a butter for 51 years to Risha, and I own the other part of the marsh from Brook Inn, and I am going to be deeding over to the rights to the conservation, so that all that land will become contiguous, the whole marsh. So, and I've enjoyed 51 years as of this month down at Portanimicut, and I'm very familiar with the landing because my family and my grandchildren and their friends have all enjoyed Portanimicut. A couple of things that I've observed with Nate is that one thing was brought up about the kayaks. One of the problems that I've observed down there is when the kayaks come in from other communities like Brewster and Howard, and they bring 10 kayaks in and they tie up the landing. And it's kind of like a show on the weekend because no one can get in and no one can get out. And it ties up that landing. I think they ought to put some kind of restrictions on what they can do with bringing in kayaks from other communities and some area where they can unload them and that, because it's time consuming. Also, as another observation, the only 2 moorings 51 years ago was Marty Rich and myself. And I've observed this mooring situation for 51 years, and we're up constantly right now 44 moorings. and also, the parking of dinghies and all that other kind of things down there. So that's just an observation. But I think one of the things that I did suggest before, and I've suggested it many times to the department of the engineer, that if they marked out 8'6" parking areas down there at the landing, they could probably get 8 to 9 parking spaces. And it's a simple thing, it's just drawing white lines. And I suggest that many times, and I still adhere to that thing that would help that parking part of it. The reason why I asked Mr. Heineman here was because he was an abutter. He is an abutter to the town-owned land. However, I thought that one of the reasons why, because he abuts, he does have a walkway going out. It's about 200 foot long. There is a beach there. That this committee should think about that in your long-term planning. That was an observation. So I think that's it.
Is there anyone else who has a question for either Chief McDonald or Nate? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right, take care.
Appreciate it. Yes, very, very much. Thank you, Nate. Yeah,
I knew you
I
would
want.
say that. I knew you would say that too.
Okay, so if we could, because I don't want to let this get away from us, could we skip for one moment to administrative business and get the minutes for the last 2 meetings out of the way, and then roll back and take care of our old business and charges. So I have reviewed the minutes from 2/13 and find them an accurate representation, and I wonder if I did not receive any revisions or edits. So I'm wondering if we could have a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and same with 226. John, thank you for doing such a great job with the minutes. I have reviewed them, find them an accurate representation, and would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. I also would like to know if we could, if it's okay with the task force, if we did our follow-ups before we get into the weeds with tasks 2 and 3. So one of our follow-ups was building removal costs, just to get a ballpark into further discussions. And Russ, do you have something for us?
I do. I talked to 3 contractors. One gave me an answer, and thus far, his cost for removal of the structure would be around $15,000, and then he figured he thought you could figure in another up to $8,000 regrading sod, seating and loaming and seating.
Did
Yeah.
that include taking out the foundation?
That would be everything.
That would be everything.
Would you repeat those, please?
$15,000 for removal of the structure, and then $8,000 to loam and seed the area.
With whatever Phil was regrading.
Loaming and seeding.
Thank you for doing that. And the other follow-up was from Phil, but I think we're premature on that, are we?
Well, we did have a meeting 2 days ago, and I did put it on the agenda, and I gave an overview of this task force, what we've done so far. When I asked for feedback, one person started by saying, well, why wouldn't we just stay with the position we had before? And there was pretty much agreement to that. Both Nate and I explained that there were some parking issues that had been raised since the Shellfish Waterways Committee last made their vote, and I said, we're going to be hearing about that today, so I didn't know the answer to some of that. So I would say the update for right now is they would still like to see potential uses of the building, and I'll just remind people there were a number of suggestions that went beyond use as a satellite harbor master office, but they were mostly, well, certainly the propagation stuff as a potential. But boating safety, education, recreational type issues. And for right now, I would say that people were definitely envisioning still having the building.
Was that a preliminary discussion, or will there be something formal coming out at some point?
Well, we hadn't heard, the committee hadn't heard anything about any possible parking issues or problems, so that was a position right now, but people are obviously, waiting to hear what else would be part of the discussion.
So you'll
So I'll be reporting to them at our next meeting, which is in April. We meet the second Tuesday of every month. And then I can report back here.
Great, terrific. Any questions or comments on what we've heard? So then the next thing on our agenda is to circle back to review and discuss charges for tasks 2 and 3. And I will remind you of what those are as soon as I find them. There we go. So, task 2 is to review the typically allowed and prohibited uses of the property, discuss both the existing and all possible uses, determine if uses are appropriate, or if new actions are needed to allow the uses on the property. If new actions are needed, include what they are and how the commission would implement them. And there are some things we don't know. But we do know what the resources are on the site, and we do know what some of the things are that we have discussed, what some of the things are that we might use the property for, and I think it's appropriate to begin to document some of those things.
Start to list them out. I mean,
List them out.
We have some kind of suggested uses for the property if the building were to stay.
So without making any decisions, we could start to just have a working list of possibilities instead of having piles of notes.
Under task 2, really should find out if anything's not appropriate.
Right. Right. So the best way to do that, I think, is if we list them and then take a look to see about appropriateness or not. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
So.
How do we want to generate the lists?
Well, hey, do you have an idea how to generate the list?
Why looking at me?
Because I thought maybe you have a look on your face that says you know how to generate the
I can
list.
suggest one easy way is, individually you can send me your lists.
Okay.
I'll try to compile them.
That would be a good homework task for the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Just do that individually.
Get
Don't do
all
it as
our-
a group, but you can send them to me.
Okay.
And I have the minutes and my own notes about some of the things that you've kind of brought up, but Phil brings specific kind of uses back from Shellfish and Waterways.
Right.
So yeah, we can just list those out and start to allowed, not allowed, just really drill down and
Right.
make sure we're.
So I'm assuming the list is kind of expansive at this point. So even things that might be a little off the wall,
Yeah.
or,
I would expect.
right, okay.
Yeah, and then some of them we will go through the chapter, is it chapter 10, work on conservation policy, land policy, and say, no, we can't do that, or we could do this, but tweak it a little bit. And remember that you also have in your packets, you have the sample Pawa Pond Conservation Area Land Management Plan that lists some of these things. So land uses, trail walking, bird watching, picnicking, scenic viewing, swimming. I mean, those are all possible. And then shellfishing, and there may be others that are appropriate for this area. And then there are also if we find that the uses are appropriate, then we can start to look at what actions need to be taken to make those work, and suggest how the commission would implement them, because I think one of the things we need to continue to remember is that we are a body that makes a recommendation. We are not a body that takes action. And then in reviewing task 3, it's to review public access to the property, including a review of any parking, circulation, access improvements, coordination with adjacent municipal landing property, creation of new public amenities, and enhancements to the water, and again, determine if changes are needed and make recommendations. And we started that a little bit last week, and our minutes reflect that, where we talked about not wanting to have the public using the marsh walk, the marsh path, and probably maintaining the path that exists to the west. Thank you.
That way.
That way.
Bill.
And then in the course of doing that, we would also look at things that are prohibited. And some of those are pretty standard. So from the PAWA, it's alcoholic beverages, littering, domestic trash, unrestrained dogs, open cooking fires, that sort of thing. But take a look and see if there are things that you think need to be added or that aren't appropriate for this.
So, Jim, can I ask
side.
you a question?
Yeah.
So those paths that, you guys, last meeting, you guys all sort of gravitated towards, felt it was important to provide access to the coastal beach area that's on this parcel. So we talked about the paths. So that's what you're going to call enhancements to the water?
Call it public access to the property?
Well, it's
Is that-
creation of new public amenities and enhancements to the water. So a clear, good, usable path was something that was kind of, you guys all like that. So that's a good example of a enhancement to the water. But are there others? I mean, we heard a little bit about dinghy storage and kayaks today, so keep those in mind. Obviously, we heard a lot about
Right.
parking and circulation.
And we might we will, I'm sure, have some things that are dependent upon whether the building's there or not there, if the basement's
Right,
there
right,
or not
yeah.
there, because the way the public would flow would also, the public's going to figure out how they want to walk.
Yeah, do you want all these thrown at you now, John, or you want all these in the letter?
Well, I mean, how do you want to try to? Do you want to also try to list these out so you can have them in front of you? But these things kind of crescendo. And is there any?
Crescendo.
Right? They the end of this task, it says if recommendations for parking or access improvements are made, consider what limitations, or such as access control, sticker only, are necessary. So it's kind of a two-step, like path to the water. Are those people going to park on this lot? And if so, are those going to be sticker people, Orleans people, or public? So there's kind of two pieces here. So I don't know how to, or we can make a list easily for task 2. But this one, I don't know. Maybe needs
So
more.
maybe, so I guess I was thinking that if we all had the same piece of paper in front of us with the same list in front of us, we could triage the list, say this is inappropriate, we got a legal opinion, we can't do this, this is inappropriate for the site, and then take a look at what else we need to add or how we would enhance the site so that we could, yeah.
My feeling is that the first major issue is the building. Should it stay? Should it go? And personally, I need to have a list from somebody why the building should stay, what it would be used for. It sounds like you have a group that has ideas, good ideas. We've heard in the past using it for educational purposes, storage of dinghies or kayaks or canoes. However, my takeaway from the chief and from the harbor master that no kayaks are allowed.
I
There's
don't,
no storage
I don't
allowed.
recall anybody saying storage of kayaks or dinghies.
Well, kayak racks, yeah, they talked about racks.
He said that there was no.
But not in the buildings.
Yeah,
that was-
he's talking about the building.
Yeah.
I said one of the suggestions that somebody made before was storage of the water quality monitoring equipment. In our committee, somebody suggested storage of some PFDs for an exchange, which actually Nate himself suggested that one.
But it sounds like you have a very good list of ideas for the building that I'd love to see. Or get from you tonight.
Yeah, I have to I'll be honest with you, I have to resurrect that because it's in a computer that no longer works. And I have a copy somewhere, but it's a letter that went out under the name of our then chairperson. So I have to dig that up, but I will work. I tried to get it, but
Is that
no. It's not one of the ones you
it's
have.
not one of the two we have?
But that's kind of that's a homework assignment that you just all agreed to take on under task 2.
Yes.
Phil will
Yeah.
provide that.
And that's what I'm getting at, though, is that I personally have no feelings one way or the other towards a building. I could think of something like, for educational purposes, that if the Audubon Society comes down and wants to hang out in the building before they go trucking around, or if a group is coming down to do some kayaking through. But as I say, it sounds like you have a group that have a purpose for the building. The other thing that I took away is that anything we do regarding the parking on this property is going to minimize the issue that's already there. Yes, we might be able to get 3 or 4 parking spaces in there, but that is, over the long haul, is that really going to be beneficial to improving the site? Plus, taking into consideration of how do you park, get in there, and get out safely. So that has to be really looked at. Getting back to what someone said at the last meeting and the meeting before, that the property was bought for passive recreational use, and which is using the path to enhance access to the beach, creating a beach area, maybe moving the dinghy somewhere else so that beach area can be used just for beaching. So anyway, I need some guidance here with particularly the building.
Fair. We don't need to make a decision about the building. We could have a two-pronged to-do list. And I think that's probably the way.
But I think, as you've said in the past, hearing the comments from the public, and there was a lovely letter that John gave us which was very beneficial to read and to understand someone's feelings towards
Mhm. I agree. I agree. In fact, I spent a good deal of time this afternoon rereading correspondence going back to the original um, transfer of the property to the town, and letters from selectmen, and just trying to pick up the flavor again. So do we all agree that we will generate lists of things that we would like to see on the property, and I challenge the public to generate the same list if they wish to participate. I will not be here at the next meeting. That's Jack will get to triage that. If it's on the 26th, or
Yeah, so that's gonna be uses for the property.
uses
And then
for
we're
the
gonna
property.
try to score them allowed or prohibited. 'Cause
That's the first
what
step,
the
yeah.
charge says, okay. So that way you'll have a knowledge base about, yeses and nos as you make more recommendations.
I think that's a great way to start, because if it's something that's not allowed, we don't need to discuss it anymore.
So on this list, we can be as
As
abstract
creative as you wish to be. Yeah.
I have one other question.
Yes.
It seems to me that the parking issue and how much, if any, parking we have on the property is going to be a relevant issue no matter what we recommend to the conscom about building or not, because even if people are coming to have a picnic or walk down the beach, most of them are going to be coming in a car. So I think we need to find out, because I have some kind of memory from our first meeting, and as people know, I'm new to some of this area of law. I thought there were limits on how much parking we can have on conservation land, so I need to know how many spaces could we put in addition to what's at the driveway. And the other thing I'd like to say, and somebody else made this suggestion, but I think it makes a lot of sense, let's stick a bike rack down there. Because that basically stays there. You don't have to worry, I mean, people don't usually leave the bike because they gotta drive away, so it's not some of the same issue with, kayaks piling up and stuff like that, but that, I've heard, I think it was Bob Perry said, in the years ago, kids used to drive down, ride bikes down and this and that. And the other thing, there's a lot of adults out there that ride bikes, and people might like to bike down and use the property no matter, what's on the property to use.
Can I rely on you to have that on your list?
Yes, but I don't know the answer to the parking.
But we
thing.
don't, well, I think we need the list, and then we're going to say allowed, disallowed. And then in order to answer the parking thing, we need to find out if there are limitations on how much parking we could allow, what kind of parking. And then we have to go talk to the chief. So, that's a whole decision tree that comes after we've listed and discovered whether it's an allowed or disallowed use. Does that sound?
Yeah, but just like Phil's suggestion about bike racks, I mean, that's task 3, new public amenities. You want to make bike amenities? We could do that. That should be a good, that's a recommendation that can go forward. It's probably easily handled, But all the parking stuff, ultimately you're going to be making recommendations to the Conservation Commission. So, and the building will likely. So you brought up the Phil. There's no limit on the amount of parking. It's more the land at 141 Portanimicut Road is constrained by sensitive resource areas. It's in the velocity zone. It's in the flood zone. It has a coastal bank. It's only going to provide for so much physical improvement, even if the building were not there. But as recommendations come down, whatever it is for the building, it'll probably be whatever it is for parking. Those are going to dovetail, because if one's not there, there might be more of the other, and so on. But you don't have to come up with those tonight. And that's not something that we're gonna be able to put to a list. But the creation of new amenities, like bike amenities, sure, absolutely easy and smart. And then the paths and stuff that we've gone over also, easy, smart. But the parking is gonna be more difficult because the parking is gonna be dependent on what else is going on there.
Right, and maybe this doesn't fit in, but I know it was mentioned at another meeting, and we also had a butter come today, and people are talking about other conservation properties on the road, and so one of the questions would be, gee, would they be willing to have a couple of spaces and people could park at the space and walk down? I don't know.
But I think we heard clearly from
I think we heard clearly from Rachel that that's a no.
we now know that Rachel being a large landowner in the neighborhood, we know future wishes, and those are those gifts to the land trust are tremendous. They're not us, and they protect land a little bit differently, and it's probably more restrictive than municipal conservation lands in some regard. So, and it's very clear from hearing Rachel tonight that those are not lands that are going to be available for future parking support.
Okay, well, I didn't know if that meant edge of the road or not.
Oh, okay.
I
It would be considered. It
Because
would be the
last time
same
somebody
as
said-
private land.
Somebody said something about take down the building and put a parking lot there. And I thought you said that wouldn't be allowed. So when people were talking about parking, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, right. We have to do this according to conservation principles, and Conservation Commission, I think, would look askance at.
Well,
It-
that
yeah.
doesn't bother me at all.
At
Paradise
yeah,
Park,
that we want to enhance and
Right.
protect and not pave it over. Yeah. Anything else from the task force? John?
No, I mean, I think we should. I mean, I guess I'll track these kind of landing recommendations that are coming out. I'll touch base with Nate. At some point, we might want to know whether they're going to recommend and the selectmen will adopt tightening up on the parking there.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that.
I don't know how that will affect whatever recommendations you make.
Right.
But we will keep you posted.
Right. Two little bits of information. One is that Conservation Commission is sending a letter to the abutter about encroachment, right?
Yes.
The encroachment. And I was at a dredge committee meeting on Monday where the beach at Portanimicut was identified as a potential, this sounds worse than it is, dredge spoils disposal site. Just
English.
in English. It would be clean sand.
That would enhance the beach.
We just throwing it out there.
Okay.
Throwing it out there. So if there is in fact maintenance dredging down there, then we just need to keep that in mind. I don't have anything else. Is there anything else from the audience? Are we good? Should we adjourn?
So move.
And a second? And please, all those in favor?